All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Feldman, you've testified that you had filed, as a lawyer for the Arvizos, a notice of claim against Los Angeles County, correct?
Correct.
And the purpose of filing that notice of claim was to preserve the right to sue in the future if you desire to, correct?
Correct.
And you told the jury that at this point, in your opinion, Gavin Arvizo and Star Arvizo still have time to file a lawsuit against Los Angeles County, correct?
I believe that's right.
The lawsuit you're referring to, if it ever occurred, would be separate and apart, or could be separate and apart from any lawsuit against Mr. Jackson in the future, true?
I think it would have to be separate and apart. I don't think you could join the two. But it would be. I think the simple answer is yes.
And as we speak, then, those two young men still have a right to sue Mr. Jackson, and they still have a right to sue Los Angeles County in a separate action, true?
True.
And by filing your notice of claim, you preserved that right for them, true?
That's what I did. Against the county.
Against the county of Los Angeles?
Yeah, it had nothing to do with Mr. Jackson.
Okay, now, you've indicated you know. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. How long have you known attorney William Dickerman?
Well, certainly since 2003. He tells me that he brought a case to me that I rejected, and I can't tell you when that happened. I sort of vaguely remember it happening, but I can't place it. I never met him till he walked into my office. I think that's the first time I ever saw him.
Did you testify this morning that you have or had a referral arrangement with him with respect to the Arvizos?
You know, loosely, I think there was an agreement with the Arvizos that he was a party to. You need the consent. Under the state bar rules, you have to have a client's consent to have, and he was in that agreement, and exactly what we said about him I don't know. But I know he expected, if there was money, to get money from me, from her, I don't know where. I can't remember the details of it, but...
Do you recall him having what is called a joint legal services agreement with you?
Vis-a-vis the Arvizos?
Yes.
He could have. I mean, I don't know what he had. He wanted to be involved if I was going to bring a case. And how those financial terms were worked out with him, I don't know. And what he wanted to be involved with the family, because he said he had this great relationship with the family, so I was there to do the legal work, and it never went anyplace.
He also wanted money, true?
He wanted money, I'm sure of that.
You had a lot of communications with him after he referred the Arvizos to you, true?
Well, we certainly had some. I don't know about a lot. I certainly had some with him.
There were faxes and letters going back and forth from his office to you for many months after he referred the Arvizos to you, right?
Could be. We certainly were trying to get his file and what he had in his file from the time he had the case till the time we were done with it initially.
And just to clarify what you just said, are you saying you're not sure if attorney William Dickerman had a legal services agreement with you?
What do you mean by a legal services agreement?
Well, let me get.
That I pay him to do legal services for me?
He does legal work with you for the Arvizos.
I don't know, is there something I'm missing about what I'm saying and you're asking?
I don't think so.
I thought he wanted to get paid for the work he thought I would let him do in the Arvizo case. If I took the Arvizo case, I don't want to break his heart, he wasn't going to do very much work if I was the lawyer on the case, but he wanted to get paid. That's the point. And how we memorialized that, I don't remember. It was in the agreement, and she consented to however we memorialized what he would get if there was money to be had.
But Prosecutor Sneddon asked you questions about a referral agreement between lawyers, correct?
He asked me questions about a referral fee, yes.
And what you're describing now is not a simple referral fee arrangement, true?
Well, I'm describing, I don't remember the way this worked. If you showed it to me, I could. But I don't think it mattered. I was going to be the lead lawyer, and he was. I guess if we gave him a task to do, he would do it.
And just to clarify things, that's something different from a strict referral fee arrangement, true?
It can or cannot be, frankly. You can do it both ways. I mean, I don't think the form it takes. I think what's important is that the two lawyers have to decide how they are going to divide fees, and on what basis, and that the most important thing is the client consents to whatever the arrangement is.
And your typical referral fee arrangement involves one lawyer referring a case to another lawyer, and if the lawyer who gets the case makes any money on it, that lawyer gives a percentage to the lawyer that referred the case to him or her, correct?
That certainly happens frequently.
That's your typical referral arrangement, isn't it?
That was at one time my typical. Are you asking me now personally, or just in general?
Just generally speaking.
Generally, I think that is the way lawyers get a case. They send it to somebody else and they get a referral fee, and they don't have to do any work.
Now, in Los Angeles County, you're known as one of the most successful plaintiffs' lawyers, correct?
Say it again for the press. I want to. That's the nicest thing anybody's said about me in this case.
Is that true?
I think so.
You've had numerous multi-million-dollar awards that you have obtained for your clients, correct?
I have.
You have numerous multi-million-dollar settlements you've obtained for your clients, correct?
I have.
And in most of those situations, you had what is called a contingency fee arrangement, correct?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, over the life of my legal career, that's absolutely right.
And generally speaking, in a contingency fee arrangement, the plaintiff's lawyer in these cases, namely you, get a percentage of whatever is recovered for the client, true?
Yes.
And in a strict contingency fee arrangement, if the lawyer doesn't obtain any money for the client, the lawyer might not get paid anything, correct?
Correct.
So there's an incentive for that lawyer to get as big a recovery as possible, because the bigger the recovery for the client, the bigger the fee for the lawyer, correct?
That's the theory.
And you have a fairly standard contingency fee arrangement that you've used through the years, correct?
I have.
In the Chandler case, the parents, who you've described as divorced, both signed your fee agreement, true?
They did. Well, I mean, you're saying that. It looks like you're looking at something. If you tell me, I hope they did. I don't remember.
Would it refresh your?
But it would have been smart on my part to get both of them to sign it.
Would it refresh your recollection if you looked at your fee agreement?
Sure.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Is that all of it?
Nods head up and down. Mr. Feldman, have you had a chance to look at that fee agreement?
I have.
Is it true that June Chandler and Evan Chandler signed that agreement?
They did.
They retained your services, correct?
They did on behalf of their son.
Now, to your knowledge, the father had been divorced from the mother since 1986, correct?
I don't know the date, but the parents were divorced. The father was remarried.
The mother remarried also, true?
Yeah, I think that is right. Except I think they were separated at the time. The mother was separated from her husband. She could have been divorced, but she did. I think she remarried.
Now, the father had not only been divorced for a number of years from the mother, he had given up all custody to the mother at that time, true?
I'm going to object as irrelevant.
I believe the prosecutor raised these issues, Your Honor.
What's the relevancy?
Who he's really representing, and what their influence is on the litigation, what their influence is on the settlement and what their motives are, and what example it sets to everyone else.
All right. The objection is sustained.
You represented both parents on behalf of the minor, Mr. Chandler, correct?
My memory is both parents were the guardian ad litems for the minor. I don't remember if representing the parents separately and apart in a separate lawsuit against anybody. I think we only had them as guardian ad litems because the young minor can't bring a lawsuit. It has to be done through someone. And originally it was done through the parents and then ultimately through a judge. Retired judge became the guardian.
And you had in that particular case ethical obligations to both the parents and the minor in your representation, true?
I suspect at some level there was. I certainly had an attorney-client privilege with them.
Well, without going into the amount of any settlement, isn't it true that both parents wanted money for themselves as well?
They didn't want it. The defense wanted them to have it, and they accepted it, because that was the defendant's idea.
Did the parents, without going into the amounts?
Sure.
Did the parents for Mr. Chandler accept money in the settlement?
They did accept money. That's a fair statement.
Okay, that would include a father who didn't even have the legal right to see the child, right?
I'm not sure that's right, because he had the child. At that time that I came in the case, the child was living with the father, so you may be right in some. There may be an order out there, but at the time I came in the case, the father, The boy lived with his dad and his dad's wife, as I recall.
Okay, now, at some point, excuse me, let me rephrase that. The mother's name is June Chandler, correct?
Correct. Or at least it was.
Okay, to your knowledge, has it changed?
No, but I don't know.
Okay, at some point she married someone named David Schwartz, correct?
Sometime she married David Schwartz.
When you were representing June Chandler, she was either married to or living with David Schwartz, true?
I'm not sure, what the situation was. I don't think their relationship was strained, I can tell you that.
Okay.
At that point in time, I have a recollection he wasn't living in the house at the time I met her, but there was still a relationship, because I can picture him in my office with her, with Evan Chandler, and with Evan Chandler's wife, and Jordy.
Now, at some point when it became clear that you were seeking money from Mr. Jackson, David Schwartz then filed his own suit against Mr. Jackson, right?
I think that's right. I think he did. I don't know when that happened, but now that you mentioned, not by me. I wasn't, somebody else.
And you were in communication with that attorney representing David Schwartz, correct?
Who was the lawyer? I don't remember. Who was the lawyer in that?
I'm questioning you, so I'm just asking you.
Oh, you don't want to answer my questions. It's not so much fun. Okay.
Do you recall that June Chandler's ex-husband then tried to sue Michael Jackson as well?
I wouldn't have remembered it, but now that you've said it, I kind of remember that he did. And I almost remember the name of the lawyer who had it, because he was a guy the first used to litigate against. But I may be wrong.
In response to Prosecutor Sneddon's questions, you indicated that the case was referred to you by a lawyer for the Chandler family, correct?
I'm going to object, Your Honor.
No.
It's vague as to what case.
Let me rephrase it. If it's vague, I'll rephrase.
All right.
Regarding your representation of Mr. Chandler, Mrs. Chandler, and their son, did you say, in response to the prosecutor's questions, that case was referred to you by another lawyer for the family?
What I want to correct is, if you take the family part out of it, I can answer it. Yes, it was referred to me by a lawyer, but that lawyer who referred it to me wasn't representing the family, per se.
Was representing the father?
He was representing the father.
His name was Barry Rothman, correct?
No.
Who referred the case to you?
The guy that referred to me was a criminal defense lawyer, who was Bob Shapiro, who was defending the father where long before I ever got in the case, there was these charges of extortion going back and forth between the father and the Jackson camp, and it was long before I got in the case. In that case there was a criminal defense lawyer representing the father, and that criminal defense lawyer brought the family to me. But he was only representing the father, and he was only representing him criminally.
Okay, now, and Robert Shapiro, of course, is the Robert Shapiro who defended O.J. Simpson, correct?
That's correct.
He was defending the father against claims that the father had tried to extort money from Mr. Jackson, correct?
Time out. I think that's wrong. Let me go back. He may have been the lawyer not for the father, but for, I think he represented Rothman, the lawyer who was in the case before I ever got in the case. I think he, too, was accused of extortion by someone on the Jackson side.
Okay.
And I think one of them, and I think Richard Hirsch, who was also a criminal defense lawyer, represented the father, or, that's what I think really happened. But somehow Shapiro and Richard Hirsch, who are two criminal defense lawyers, advised the family that they had the wrong civil lawyer and they should come see me. And that's basically how I got there.
They advised the family that Gloria Allred was the wrong lawyer and they should come to you, correct?
That's what I understand.
Okay, now, there was a lawyer named Barry Rothman involved, correct?
Before Gloria Allred.
And Barry Rothman represented the father, true?
Well, that's a good question, who he represented. I thought he represented probably the father and Jordy, I suspect. I mean, it's unclear to me, that whole deal.
And Rothman is a lawyer that was accused of extortion by people associated with Mr. Jackson as well, correct?
I think both Rothman and Jackson, I'm sorry. Rothman and Evan Chandler were accused of extortion by the Jackson side. I don't know who on the Jackson side.
And attorney Barry Rothman has since been disbarred, correct?
I don't know, has he?
Yes.
I didn't know him before, I don't know him now. And if he is, he is. I don't know.
So you don't know him at all?
I don't know Barry Rothman.
You had various meetings with him during this litigation, did you not?
No.
I'm going to object as immaterial and irrelevant.
Sustained.
No, it was sustained, so.
You typically enter into a contingency fee agreement at the beginning of your relationship with the client, correct?
At the early stages, yes.
And the obvious purpose of that is, before you want to do any work, you want to make sure you're going to get paid if certain things happen, correct?
Yes.
And before I go any further, you talked about people you have represented in your practice. You've also represented oil companies in recent years, correct?
Yes.
You've defended oil companies accused by the state of California of overcharging consumers, correct?
Yes.
And you've represented them quite successfully, haven't you?
Well, that was one I represented, and it was a very successful.
It was a long trial, true?
It was a long trial.
Okay.
First time and only time in my life that I ever did anything like that.
Okay, and what year was that?
Let's see, I defended them, is this important? I mean, I can't remember. Let's see, I have enough trouble remembering who I'm representing today. Let's see, I represented them, I want to say let's see. Somewhere around late 90s, 2000. I mean, it could have been, it's one way or the other. I was called in just to try the lawsuit. And the case had been going on for like 20 years, believe it or not, and so I can't give it. If it's important, I could figure it out, but it's somewhere then.
Somewhere where?
Somewhere 1999, 2000, 2001. 1998. A few years ago this happened.
Now, in the 1993 case, you retained Stanley Katz, correct?
Yes.
When had you first met Stanley Katz?
1987.
And that was in relation to a civil lawsuit?
No. I represented, in fact, my wife really represented, and she wasn't my wife then. But I got called in to represent a former grandson of the President of the United States who was being accused of physical abuse, him and his wife. And I knew nothing about that kind of a field, never done anything like that, but ultimately, I did it. And Stanley Katz, who I never knew of or heard of, was an expert on the case. And if you ask me what, I don't even remember what he testified to, but he did testify. And it was a case downtown in the criminal courts building.
So this was a case where two adults were accused of abusing a child?
Yeah, by the Department of Children's Services.
And you defended
I defended.
The parents, true?
The parents, yes.
And you did it successfully, correct?
I did it successfully.
Stanley Katz was an expert for you.
He was.
Right? So Stanley Katz knew that in this particular case, adults were falsely charged with sexual assault, correct?
No. Well, charged by the government, not by the kid. The kids, there was a baby, it was 1 year old. He wasn't accusing anybody of doing anything. This was the county. The kid was abused, there was no issue, Mr. Mesereau. The child was abused. The question is, did the maid abuse the child or did these parents abuse the child? And in my view and in the court's view, the maid did it, and we proved it.
But just to get it in the record.
Yeah.
You, with the assistance of Stanley Katz, defended two adults against false claims of abuse, correct?
By the government, yes.
Okay.
And I do remember what he sort of testified to, if it's important to you.
When were these false claims by the government initially filed? Do you know?
Yeah, I assume it's 1987, because that's when I did it.
How long were you involved in that case with Stanley Katz?
Well, Stanley Katz testified. He was on the stand and got off the stand. But, I mean, the case was ongoing. And I think we tried it. Took like 5 days or so to try it, 6 days. And that was it.
And was that tried in front of a judge or a jury?
Judge.
Was that in the administrative courts or the criminal courts?
It was in the criminal court building. A regular judge.
Was it a criminal case where a jury was waived?
No, it was a dependency case. They were trying to take the child away from these parents who had adopted this child.
And it was just solely a judge who decided the government's claims of abuse were false against your clients, right?
That's correct.
Alright. Now, at some point you call Lieutenant Klapakis in this case, correct?
I called him or he called me.
Okay. Do you know about when that was?
Yeah, about. It was I'm going to say around June of '03. I think he must have called me. I don't think I would have called him. I never heard of him.
It was approximately June 13, 2003, correct?
I wouldn't disagree with that. I don't have an independent recollection of the day, but I wouldn't disagree about the time frame.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you a police report?
If you tell me, unless that day is critical to you, I'll look at it. I don't know, is it a police report of what he says about me?
Yes.
I don't know, it's up to you. It's your show. I don't remember the precise day. I'd accept it's about that time. If you told me it was the 14th, I'd believe you. And if you told me it was the 12th, I'd believe you.
Would it refresh your recollection if I...
You got to show me. I know that trick. Show me the document and I'll tell you if it refreshes my recollection. How do I know unless you show it? It doesn't refresh my memory.
Have you had a chance to look at the report?
I have.
Does it refresh your recollection about the day that you spoke to Lieutenant Klapakis?
I know I spoke to him. It doesn't refresh my recollection about the date. But as I said, I can't argue with that date.
Had you spoken with Lieutenant Klapakis before that date, to your knowledge?
Not by name. I don't know the person, to my knowledge. But I wouldn't know him if he's in this courtroom.
Have you met with anyone representing the government to discuss your testimony in this case?
In a loose way. When you say, the government interviewed me about my testimony.
When did anyone with the government last interview you about your testimony?
I guess yesterday.
And who was in the meeting?
Mr. Sneddon.
Anyone else?
No.
How long was the meeting?
Besides locking myself up in his office and having to set the alarm because I couldn't get out because it was after hours. If you don't count that time, it was probably an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, somewhere in that range.
Was Mr. Sneddon alone?
Yeah, I thought I said that.
There was no sheriff present?
No.
No other prosecutor present?
No.
Okay, so you and Mr. Sneddon, for an hour and a half yesterday, discussed your testimony, right?
Yes.
Were you shown any documents by Mr. Sneddon to help you prepare for your testimony?
No.
At any time did any representative of the government send you documents to review to prepare you for your testimony?
They did send me my grand jury transcript.
And did you review that?
Yes.
Okay, when did you review it?
Within the last week or 10 days. 2 weeks. Something like that. At some point when I got it, I read it.
When did you last talk to Stanley Katz?
He called me when he left here from testifying on the way home.
Did you talk to him before that?
He called me while he was waiting up. Well, I don't know where he was waiting, but he was waiting to testify, and he called me. Or I think he called me. He called me, Dickerman called me, and he had a cell phone. They were both in some room together. And I said, "Is Katz with you?" And he said, "Yes." And he had previously called me, and so I returned his call after I got done talking to Dickerman.
Let me just get this straight. You talked to Mr. Katz?
Doctor.
You talked to Dr. Katz after he testified here, right?
After he testified, he called me on the way back to LA.
You talked to him as he was waiting to testify, correct?
I talked to him while he was waiting to testify.
You talked to Mr. Dickerman as he was waiting to testify, correct?
I talked to Mr. Dickerman while he was waiting to testify.
Did you talk to Mr. Katz before he came here to testify?
Yes.
When was that?
I can't tell you the day. I can tell you that he called me and wanted to come to my office and meet with me.
Did you?
I can't remember when it was. It was sometime during this trial. I can't picture exactly when it was.
Did you talk to Mr. Dickerman before he came here to testify?
No, I don't think so. You don't mean ever. You mean, I talked to Dickerman a lot at one point, and then we really haven't had contact. And then we had contact that day, the day while he was here, and that's about it, that I remember. I can't swear we didn't have a minute conversation at some point.
So Stanley Katz wanted to come to your office to talk about this case?
Yes.
And approximately when did he make that request?
Within the last couple of weeks. Maybe a month. It's between 2 weeks and a month.
To your knowledge, has Stanley Katz ever met with Bill Dickerman, other than the fact they were in the same room waiting to testify and both spoke to you on the phone at essentially the same time?
Well, Katz came to see me to tell me that he...
I'm not asking you what he said. Just...
No, let me think to myself. When he came to visit me after the first meeting he had with the family, I think he had 2 meetings with the family, but I won't even swear to that. But I think he did. And maybe he had more. But in between one of these meetings that he had with the family where he was interviewing, he came to see me, Dr. Katz, and it is possible that Dickerman was in that meeting. It is possible he wasn't in that meeting. I don't know. And that would be the only time that I can think of that they possibly could have been together.
When did that meeting occur?
Do you mean the day?
Not the specific day, just roughly.
That meeting happened. If I knew the day I went to the Department of Children's Services, which has got to be, if you tell me that this lieutenant called me on the 13th, I would guess I went to Children's Services around the 12th of June. 11th, 12th of June. So that would mean that that meeting happened before then, and after, say, June 1st. So, in that time frame.
Is it your understanding that other than interviewing members of the Arvizos family, Dr. Katz did not pursue any other independent investigation?
That's all. That's all I know he did.
Okay. To your knowledge, are you related to anyone who has referred patients to Dr. Katz?
Not that I know of.
Okay. You don't know of any.
That referred patients to Dr. Katz?
Anyone who you were related to by marriage that referred patients to Dr. Katz.
Oh, my wife. I'm married to my wife, and I think she used Dr. Katz. She headed up a law firm that defended children, and represented tens of thousands of children, and I think they, from time to time, might have used Dr. Katz. I don't know if she did or didn't. I mean, she certainly.
But you think she did?
Yeah, I mean, I know at times in her life she did. She's the one that introduced me to Dr. Katz in 1987, so she was a fan of Dr. Katz.
And it was your understanding they had some kind of business relationship, but you don't know what it is, right?
My wife and Dr. Katz? Well, they didn't have a business relationship. She would refer clients. She defended people accused of abuse. She represented children against their parents when parents were abusing them. And she headed up a public interest law firm, and she would use Dr. Katz, and...
Okay.
Hopefully it was totally business. Laughter.
Did you ever learn that Dr. Katz was secretly recorded by the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department in a phone conversation?
Yes.
How did you learn about that?
He told me.
Did he tell you that on a number of occasions he referred to the lawsuit in discussing the Arvizos?
This is hearsay, Your Honor.
Overruled. You may answer.
Did he?
Do you want the question read back?
I just got to ask him, did he tell me what about that?
That in that secretly recorded conversation with a sheriff's representative, he, on a number of occasions in discussing the Arvizos, referred to the lawsuit.
Did he tell the sheriff that, or did he tell the Arvizos that?
The sheriff's that.
Oh, I don't know.
You don't know about that?
I don't know one way or the other about that.
But he told you he was secretly recorded, right?
He told me that he was secretly recorded by the sheriffs, yes.
All right. To your knowledge, have you ever been secretly recorded in this case?
I hope not.
You need to speak closer to the microphone.
I hope not. I don't know of any recordings, no.
Do you have any knowledge, other than what Mr. Katz told you, about the sheriff secretly recording people in phone conversations in this investigation?
No, I really don't. I just know he said he was recorded. I know it was secret. He didn't know about it, so I guess it was a secret from him.
How long, in your mind, did you represent the Arvizos?
Boy, that's the toughest question you've asked. I can tell you I represented them from May to the time I referred it to the police, or referred it to Mr. Sneddon and the police took over. And I had no contact, the best that I can recall, with the Arvizos, and that ultimately culminated in a letter from me to them terminating my relationship with them. I didn't want any responsibility. I didn't talk to them again until after the news hit of the search of Neverland and the pending arrest of Mr. Jackson. And it was sometime after that I heard from them again. So from my perspective, I terminated our relationship legally, as a lawyer should do, in writing, telling them they could do what they want, but don't look to me to represent you.
And if you chose to in the future, Mr. Feldman, nothing would prevent you from representing them again, correct?
If I wanted to?
Yes.
If I wanted to, nothing.
Now, have you represented Mr. J. Jackson in your legal work?
Well, only to the extent as he has talked to me about issues of you guys trying to get into.
Objection. I'm not asking you what he's talked to you about. I'm just asking, have you represented J. Jackson as a lawyer?
Well, when you say, represented, he has called me in my capacity as a lawyer, and I have given him advice as a lawyer.
And approximately when did you give J. Jackson advice as a lawyer?
Well, I don't know. Let's see. After they got married, which I don't remember when, but it was after they got married. And it was, you would know better. It was in connection with a search warrant. Or, not a search warrant. A subpoena you served on his military records, and that's the only time that I think I can remember talking to him.
Well, you certainly were advising him as a lawyer as of approximately November 15, 2004, correct?
I don't know the date.
Well, your firm, in a legal proceeding in this case, took the position that a fax from J. Jackson to you dated November 15, 2004, was confidential, right?
If J. Jackson communicates with me, it's in the attorney-client. That's what I said, and everything he told me is privileged, just like any other lawyer.
Do you know whether or not your law firm has taken a position in this case that a fax from J. Jackson to you of November 15, 2004, is confidential and privileged?
Well, I hope so, since it is.
Your Honor, I'm going to object.
Sustained. You're not allowed to go into attorney-client privilege without my permission.
I'm not going into it, Your Honor. Just their position.
Well, even claiming the privilege is improper. To raise it in front of the jury. We've gone over this before.
You have represented the parents of Janet Arvizos in this case, correct?
Her parents.
Yes.
Yes.
You represented them in an attempt to prevent us from seeing if she deposited money into her parents' account, true?
I prevented you from getting into these parents' bank records.
Correct.
That's right.
And in doing that, sir, you tried to prevent us from seeing if Janet got checks or David Arvizos got checks, whether they deposited them into her parents' account.
No, Mr. Mesereau, I prevented you from dragging in these poor parents, who don't even speak English, into this melee.
Do you know?
That's all I tried to do. I don't know anything about Janet doing anything. I'm only telling you. You asked me what I did. That's what I tried to do, is prevent them from getting dragged in. If you look at your subpoena, it's pretty broad.
Sir, you can't prevent the parents from being subpoenaed as witnesses in this case, can you?
No.
And you haven't even tried to do that.
And I wouldn't.
The only thing you tried to do was stop us from seeing whether Janet put money into her parents' account?
I object as argumentative.
That's not true.
Just a minute. There's a lot of law and motion in this case that took place outside the presence of the jury, and there's various legal reasons why things were done, and I did them. And it's improper for you to be attacking a witness on that issue.
Yes, Your Honor. I withdraw the question. May I just ask about the scope of his representation, just when he did it, when he represented the parents? Not scope, Your Honor. The dates of it.
I'm not sure if that's a privileged matter or not. That's why I'm concerned.
It would have to do with statements he's made before, Your Honor, about representing the Arvizos. I'm just trying to find out roughly when he represented the parents.
No, I don't see any relevancy.
Okay, Your Honor, may I ask if he still does?
No, I don't see any relevance to.
Okay.
To people he represents, when he represented them. If I'm missing something, you can approach the bench. I'm, trying to see from this standpoint what the relevancy could be, but I can't see it.
May I approach, Your Honor?
To the jury? Okay. You can talk. Discussion held off the record at sidebar. All right. After reviewing with Mr. Mesereau his reason, I'm going to allow a question that I didn't a moment ago. You may ask it.
Mr. Feldman, during what approximate period of time did you represent the parents of Janet Arvizos in this case?
I can't give you the date. The event was when they were served with a subpoena, their bank got served with a subpoena to get all of their checks and all of their financial records. And whenever you served that subpoena, that is when I represented them.
Do you currently, as far as you're concerned, represent either of the parents of Janet Arvizo?
I do not represent either of the parents of Janet Arvizo, as far as I'm concerned.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you a pleading just so you can identify a time that you were representing the parents?
Sure, yeah.
Would that be all right, Your Honor?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Feldman, have you had a chance to review that document?
Yes.
And does it refresh your recollection about the period of time during which you represented David and Maria Ventura, the parents of Janet?
Approximately.
And approximately what was the period during which you represented and your firm represented David and Maria Ventura?
Approximately the end of December of 2004 to January 2005. 3-4 weeks.
That would be till approximately what, January 14th?
I thought that's the date of the hearing that we had, yes.
Okay, and after that hearing, did your representation cease as far as you're concerned?
Yes, it was just for that limited purpose on that subpoena.
Okay, how many meetings do you think you've had with Mr. Sneddon about this criminal case?
And I'm going to interpret meetings face to face. Is that what we're talking about?
Let's start with that.
I would say 3, 4, maybe 5 at the most, including yesterday.
And how many times do you think you've spoken on the telephone with Prosecutor Sneddon about this criminal case?
Well, I don't know. Maybe, at least 2 or 3 times I've been scheduled to come, and he's called me to tell me I'm not coming. So that's 3. We haven't had a lot of phone calls. I can't, frankly. I called him when I called him to say, here's the case. Do what you want with it. And maybe, I don't know. 5, 6. Something. Not a lot. I mean, I don't know, something like that.
How many times do you think you met with Mr. Sneddon regarding your representation of Mr. Chandler in 1993?
I don't know if I ever met with him in 93. With Mr. Sneddon?
Yes.
93 I was on my own, I was handling.
You certainly spoke to him.
I was handling the case. I'm sure I spoke with him, but I don't think I ever met with him. Maybe I did. I could have. I just can't remember, Mr. Mesereau. It's so long ago. I mean, that's 12 years ago. I just don't have an independent memory of whether I did or didn't. Because the case was also in LA, and, I was dealing with the LA lawyers, criminal lawyers.
Would it be accurate to say that you at least talked to Mr. Sneddon a number of times in 1993 about your representation of Mr. Chandler?
Not Mr. Chandler. Now is little Jordy, who's now a Mr., or is it his father we're talking about? When you say, Mr. Chandler, Jordy, who are we talking about?
Any of them.
I don't think it could have happened. I can't deny it. I just have no recollection of it one way or the other. I don't remember having any real discussions with Mr. Sneddon on the case.
Do you remember meeting with any other prosecutor besides Mr. Sneddon at any time regarding this current case?
Yes.
And who would that be?
Mr. Zonin.
How many times do you think you've met with Mr. Zonin about this case?
A couple maybe. I don't remember. I can remember one. I've seen him, though. I mean, this isn't just the second time I've seen him, so it must have been more, but nothing stands out in my mind about meeting with him.
Have you had phone conversations with Prosecutor Zonin about this case?
Yes.
Approximately how many do you think?
A few.
Have you had any other meetings with any other prosecutor on this case besides Prosecutor Sneddon and Prosecutor Zonin?
Some prosecutor that. My records got subpoenaed to the court, and some prosecutor, said he was a prosecutor, called me about it, whether I had filed the documents or didn't file the documents. I mean, I can remember that kind of stuff.
Have you had any meetings with representatives of the Sheriff's Department involving this case?
I'll answer that in a second. I just want to go back to something that just.
Sure.
There was a real issue in this case before it ever got to trial. I didn't want to do anything, and there was an issue, so I do think I talked to Mr. Zonin more about, why don't you do the objecting and leave me out of this? My law firm doesn't want to do this, I don't want to do this, and he couldn't represent the victims, so before I ever acted, I wanted the DA to do all the legal work. Not me.
I understand. And that saved you a lot of money, correct?
Pardon me?
That could save you a lot of money in the future?
It would save me a lot of aggravation and energy, I could tell you that. Not in the future. Period. I didn't want to do it. I'm not representing these people, so I would talk to Mr. Zonin. I want to just amend that, because I would talk to him, and he would say he can't do that, and I'd wind up either doing it or not doing it. So there were those kind of conversations. Now, back to the sheriffs. Who did I talk to? This lieutenant, I guess, called me. I talked to him. When I went to the grand jury, there was somebody who, brought me up here on the freeway and drove me up here or I followed through some parking lot to get to where the secret grand jury was, so somebody talked to me while I was sitting around waiting, those kind of things. But no sheriff has ever interviewed me. No police officer, to my knowledge, has ever come down and interviewed me or anything.
How many meetings with any representative of the sheriff's department do you think you've had in this case?
Meetings other than getting me here, logistics kind of things?
Sure.
None, I don't think.
You've never been interviewed by any sheriffs in this case?
If I was, I don't remember it.
How many phone conversations do you think you've had with any sheriff in this case?
I mean, I don't know who are the sheriffs and who are the police.
How about the name, Klapakis?
Well, obviously you showed me something that says he called me. But in deference to the lieutenant, I wouldn't have remembered that. But you did show me that, so he obviously called me. But that's about it. The police cut me out of this case the minute I gave it to them. In fact, that's why we severed our relationship. I severed the relationship. I was out of this.
Do you remember you were interviewed on January 16, 2004, on the NBC Today show by Matt Lauer?
I went on the Today show and Matt Lauer interviewed me.
Do you remember that?
And that's right before the gag order was issued. I don't remember the date that the gag order was issued, but it was right about that time.
Remember you were asked by Mr. Lauer if you were going to join Mr. Sneddon on the prosecution team, and you said, I have no comment.
I did.
Other than your grand jury transcripts, have you reviewed any other documents to prepare for your testimony today?
No.
Now, you have represented Gavin Arvizos in other proceedings in Los Angeles other than what you have identified, correct?
I have?
Yes.
Gavin Arvizos?
Yes.
What is that? No.
Have you ever represented Gavin Arvizos in an attempt to stop his juvenile records from being produced?
No. I mean, I wrote a letter, I think. No, not on Gavin. Not that I know of. I didn't even know he had a juvenile record.
Well, my question is, have you or your firm ever written to Judge Nash in Los Angeles?
Oh, that's a different story. That's not his juvenile records.
Why don't you explain?
That's his Department of Children's Services records. Yes, I wrote to Judge Nash, who heads up that department, and said that those records should remain confidential, because they are confidential under the law. And that children ought to be able to go to the Department of Children's Services and tell whatever they want to tell, and it ought not be used in any public forum.
When did you represent?
Whenever somebody was trying to get them.
And over what period of time was this, do you think?
How long you were trying to get them?
I'm just asking. Let me rephrase the question. Over what period of time do you think you represented any of the Arvizos children in that particular area?
From the moment I found out that Judge Nash wrote to me and said they were trying to get, I don't want to get this confused, because also my recollection is they were trying to get Jordy's records. And I got a letter from Judge Nash. I didn't solicit it. He wrote to me and wanted to know whether or not on behalf of these children, it was either you, maybe it was the press. I don't remember who wanted to get these records. Somebody wanted to get these confidential records. And I wrote on behalf of Jordy and I wrote on behalf of Arvizos probably, that we did object. That's what we did. We didn't have a hearing or anything. But, I mean.
You also wrote on behalf of Gavin, Starr, and Devellin to prevent release of juvenile court records, true?
Do you mean criminal records, like juvenile criminal?
Juvenile court records. Yes or no, sir?
Well, I don't know what you mean by it, so I can't answer it yes or no. I just told you what I remember. It was the Department of Children's Services. I don't even know that Gavin had. I mean, I can't help you, because.
Unless counsel is going to produce something to show in good faith that he's asking that question, I object to the question and ask that the question and the answer be stricken.
I have some correspondence that I was going to try to refresh the recollection of the witness, Your Honor. But I can move on, if the court wants me.
The question's ambiguous, since the juvenile court covers several jurisdictions.
Does that mean my motion is granted, then, Your Honor, to strike?
Strike his answer?
Yes, sir.
No. Go ahead. Next question.
Mr. Feldman, have you represented Gavin, Starr and Devellin Arvizo in proceedings in the Juvenile Division of the Superior Court of Los Angeles when representatives of the media tried to obtain any juvenile court records they might have?
Well, you keep saying, I don't know that they have any criminal juvenile court. That's what I think about the juvenile court, as a criminal court for juveniles. To my knowledge, I never heard of this, to this second, that there was. I did represent them in the department, in the dependency court in the county of Los Angeles. And in that, I objected to the media, to you, or anyone else, ever seeing those records. Yes, they're supposed to be confidential. Now, I don't know what happened.
Now, would it refresh your recollection on this issue if I show you a letter to you from the Superior Court, Juvenile Division, Los Angeles?
Yes. Judge Nash?
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I don't know if it will refresh my recollection, but I'll try. Yeah, but it's, no, let me see. Let me see. Yeah, I'm right. It's just what I told you. Judge Nash is the supervising judge.
Mr. Feldman, let me just, please.
Oh.
Have you had a chance to look at that letter?
I have, and it's exactly what I've said.
Is it a letter to you of February 5, 2004?
I didn't look at the date.
In the matter of Gavin, Starr, and Devellin Arvizo, from Terry Tran, research attorney, from the office of the presiding judge.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to counsel reading this. The question is, does it refresh his recollection?
Sustained.
Have you had a chance to review the letter?
I have.
Does it refresh your recollection about whether or not you represented the Arvizo children on that issue?
Object is vague.
What's
sustained?
Mr. Feldman, does that letter refresh your recollection about whether or not you ever represented Gavin, Starr or Devellin Arvizo on the issue of whether or not any juvenile records should be disclosed from the LA Superior Court?
Sir, I am going to tell you that does refresh my recollection, and it says exactly what I just told you. The news media was trying to get their records from dependency court. Judge Nash is the head of the whole juvenile system for Los Angeles at that time. He was the presiding judge. He asked me if I objected, and I did object, and I do object, and I will always object for these child dependency records to ever leave that courthouse, because children are supposed to be able to go there and be protected, not have to worry about the media or you, or anybody else attacking those children.
You did represent them on that issue, true?
That's true.
Thank you. Do you know how long you represented the Arvizo children on that issue?
Oh, I got a lot of letters on that. It wasn't just one, so you showed me one. What was the date? You said February, 05? But if you asked me, I would have said I got one before that, frankly.
February 5, 2004.
Oh, 04. That would be more likely. And over the period of time, I know Judge Nash, and so over time I think they had written me letters, like I said, on behalf of the Arvizos and on behalf of the Chandlers asking for whether we objected to him releasing it to the media. I think there's a procedure that they have to do that. But I may be wrong on that. This is not my field.
You told the jury that at some point you personally contacted the Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services regarding this particular matter, correct?
Yes.
And you did that with Stanley Katz, correct?
Yes.
To your knowledge, was Mr. Dickerman involved in that approach?
Did Dickerman go with us? Was that the, I don't know what you mean.
We'll start with that. Did Dickerman go with you?
No, he did not.
Did Dickerman discuss it with you?
I am sure that, I didn't just do this, because when you do this, there could be serious ramifications for the family.
I'm just asking you, sir, to answer the question.
Well, I'm trying to remember.
Did Mr. Dickerman participate with you in any event?
He didn't go with me, I can tell you that. Whether or not I ever discussed it with him, I thought.
Pardon me?
That's hard to remember. I certainly should have. In the normal course, I should have told him that this was what I was going to do, and this is what I thought might or possibly could happen. I mean, because I had to tell the parents what was happening, or the mother.
Do you have any knowledge of the case Janet filed against J.C. Penney?
Just what I read.
Have you ever been in contact with any lawyers for Janet Arvizos who represented her in the J.C. Penney matter?
Well, when you say, contact, yeah, I tried to.
Excuse me, I'm going to object as immaterial.
Just a minute. Sustained.
Do you remember ever meeting someone named Jamie Masada in your office?
I remember Mr. Masada coming to my office for the first meeting and me not letting him in my office. That's.
Did he remain in the lobby, to your knowledge?
He did. I wouldn't let him in.
Was it your understanding that he had transported the Arvizos to your office?
I don't know how they got to my office, but he was there with Mr. Dickerman, and I wasn't letting him in.
You weren't letting him in because it could affect the attorney-client privilege, right?
That's right.
Explain that, if the members of the jury don't know what you meant.
Sure.
Why don't you explain that?
Give me break, huh? The privilege is sacrosanct. If you tell me something as a lawyer, I can never tell anybody what you've told me. If I have a third party in that room with me, then that privilege, there is no privilege. It no longer remains confidential. So good lawyers will never let somebody other than the client in their office to talk to them because you lose the privilege if they want to tell you something. The exception to that, sort of, is with children, because children have to act through a guardian, so you'd have their parents in with you. But generally that's what it is. Mr. Masada wanted to, because I think he was a friend of theirs is what I gathered at the time, wanted to be there to give them moral support or whatever, and it wasn't going to happen on my watch. And I said that he could not come in, and he accepted that, and I guess he sat out there. I can't frankly. I don't remember Mr. Masada, other than that.
Alright, have you talked to him on the phone at any time?
Masada?
Yes.
Not that I know of. I don't think I did.
Okay, was it your understanding he was a friend of the Arvizos when you met him?
You know, I didn't know if he was a friend of theirs, or a friend of Dickerman's, or a friend of both. I frankly didn't quite get where he fit in all this at that point. I knew he was a friend of Dickerman's, and I didn't know really.
Okay, who contacted you about testifying before the grand jury?
I guess Mr. Sneddon. Either Mr. Sneddon or Mr. Zonin. One of them.
Before you testified to the grand jury, did you discuss your testimony with Prosecutor Sneddon?
Let's see. That's a good question. I mean, I can tell you nobody. Not that day, that's for sure. I mean, I don't really remember that, frankly. I know I didn't that day. I just sat down in some room, and they called me in and they asked me questions.
Did you discuss your testimony that you gave before the grand jury with anyone associated with the prosecution before you gave it?
I should know that. I don't remember that. I mean, I don't remember it, frankly. They may have called me at some time on the phone, but there wasn't any in-depth conversation about this, that I can remember, in anticipation of my testimony.
Did anyone ever tell you what questions they were going to ask you in the grand jury room?
No.
No one ever even came close to the subject?
The subject came up about the privilege, and I was very concerned about the privilege, and that I remember talking to somebody about.
Well, you took the position it was waived in that proceeding, didn't you?
I didn't take the position. The prosecution took the position it was waived. And it was. But I was concerned long before it got waived when I was told that I might go, that they wanted me. I like being a lawyer, Mr. Mesereau. I don't like being a witness. You might understand that, and I'm much more comfortable where you are than where I am right now. And so when it was approached that I was going to become a witness and testify, I was concerned about the privilege, and I wasn't about to testify unless there was a written waiver by the children in the Arvizos. Miss Arvizos, if they were planning on asking me what she said to me, and where we are, and what I did, and why I did it. And they obtained a written waiver.
We can move on from that subject.
Okay.
In May of 2004, you represented Janet Arvizos in an attempt to stop NBC from obtaining West Covina Police Department records, correct, of Janet.
Yes. I sent them a letter, saying she objected to it.
Did you do anything besides send a letter?
We certainly, to my recollection, we didn't file anything. I think we sent a letter. They said, if you object, they sent a letter. I think the police sent a letter or something, said they were going to release it, if you object or don't object. So we objected, because she didn't want her picture. It was about her picture, the mug shot of her picture going on television. she was worried about, and we got assurance that nobody was going to do that, put her picture on television, since her privacy was being invaded already. And so once we got assurance that wasn't going to happen, I think that's what we did. So we objected, and I think the lawyers for the media gave us that assurance that nobody would do that, or something. That's what the concern was.
When you filed your claim against Los Angeles County?
Yes.
On behalf of Janet Arvizo, Star Arvizo, Gavin Arvizo, and Devellin Arvizo, where did you file it?
The County of Los Angeles.
Did you have any further correspondence with them after you filed it?
With the county?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. We wanted them to investigate, and they weren't investigating how this thing got leaked, and so I had several letters back and forth with Mr. Saunders, and then when we filed the claim, some claims adjuster for the county I think sent a letter.
Now, Mr. Feldman, you previously told the jury that you don't have knowledge of the J.C. Penney case, correct?
No, I didn't say that. How could I not? It was all over the news. I mean, I hear it every day. I mean, I don't have any. I didn't say that.
Well, Mr. Feldman, in June of 2004, you tried to stop the release of records involving the J.C. Penney case on behalf of the Arvizos, correct?
We wanted the records for Janet. The lawyer that represented them took the position we couldn't have them unless we gave them to Janet's husband. And since Janet's husband was having a love affair with the media at that time, and he was on television every day, we weren't going to let those records go out to him because we thought he would use them against her. And so we were trying to get the records, and we never got them.
But you tried to stop the city of West Covina from releasing arrest records of Janet in that case?
I'm going to object as asked and answered.
It was the picture.
Objection sustained.
Let me just take a second, Your Honor, just to look at my notes.
Yes.
Mr. Feldman, do you remember telling two individuals, Michael Viner and Larry King, that Janet is making up these allegations?
Absolutely not. Are you kidding?
Do you remember meeting with those two individuals at the Grill in Beverly Hills?
No, never met with them.
Do you know who Michael Viner is?
I couldn't pick him out. I know who he is. I think the answer is I wouldn't know him if he was sitting in the jury box. But I know who he is by name. He's a publisher or something, or a writer, or, I don't know. Viner Books, right? Something like that. I certainly know who Larry King is.
You did have a meeting with him and Larry King, right?
I have never had a meeting with Michael Viner in my life.
So approximately 9 months ago, you didn't meet with Mr. King and Mr. Viner, correct?
I absolutely have never had a meeting with Michael Viner in my life.
Okay, and did you ever tell Larry King that these allegations against Mr. Jackson are false?
Absolutely not.
I have no further questions.
I don't even know.
Okay.
The proverbial answer.
Mr. Feldman, let's go back to and clarify something, if we can. You were involved at one time in the dependency court involving a case where there was a baby who was alleged to have been abused. Is that correct?
Correct.
And was the nature of the abuse in that case sexual or physical?
Physical.
And how old was this baby?
13 months or 12 months or 13 months. It was an infant.
And this was in the dependency court, correct?
This was in the dependency court. These parents had just adopted this child, and the County of Los Angeles was trying to take the child away from these parents.
So the lawsuit involved the County of Los Angeles and the individuals who were accused, correct?
Correct.
You indicated to the court and to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that at some point you did represent, to oppose a subpoena duces tecum the parents of the Arvizos, correct?
Yes.
And what exactly was the objection that you had to that?
It was invading their privacy. Two grandparents of this little boy, who all of a sudden the defense wants to get all of their financial records, every check they've ever written, every bank account they've ever done business in.
Was there?
I thought it was overly broad and unfair to these grandparents, since I'm one myself, to get dragged into this thing.
Did the scope of the records that were requested go far beyond the time frame of the events involved in this case?
I thought it was the most overbroad, overreaching thing, and we objected and brought it to the court, to Judge Melville's attention. And frankly, I don't recall what the judge ruled, but that's what we did.
Okay. I want to go back to the Jordan Chandler versus Michael Jackson lawsuit, if we can for a moment.
Sure.
I want to go to that point in time where the case has been settled, it's been resolved, okay?
Yes.
Do you recall having a meeting after the case had been resolved and settled in favor of your client, with members or representatives of the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office and the Santa Barbara District Attorney's Office in your office?
Objection. Leading. Beyond the scope.
Well, it's leading. I'll sustain the objection.
Do you recall whether or not you ever had a meeting with representatives of the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office and the Santa Barbara District Attorney's Office in your office after the case had been resolved in favor of your client?
Objection. Leading. And beyond the scope. No foundation.
It's the same question. Maybe we just ought to call it refreshing his memory.
I said, whether or not, Your Honor. That doesn't make it leading.
All right. I was trying to be humorous.
Oh, I guess I lost my humor this morning. You were trying to read my mind once before.
Let's take a break.